Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Distil-Nation NZ podcast. My name is Tom. I'm joined, as always, by my friend Cameron. Hello,
Good
Cameron.
to be here, as always.
And we've got a special guest today. Hello, Igor. How you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
So, Igor, you are the, I assume you're the owner and distiller over at Bayside Rum Co. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So, you reached out to us because you, have you listened to the podcast before, have you?
I have, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he reached out because he is working on a really cool community partnership that we're going to get into later.
Oh, right, yeah.
And he said, would you share this video? And I said, yes, we will. But if you want to talk about that, come on the podcast.
Yeah.
And so here we are.
Yeah, cool. And thank you so much for sending us some of your rums to try. I'm very excited about this. I mean, where do you want to start? What do you
first
reckon?
things first, Igor, because prior to Bayside Rum, you've been in the hospo business for some time. So how did you get into that and where does it start for you?
It started straight after I finished studying. I finished business management degree and then decided that I wasn't going to continue with that any further and just wanted to get out there and just get a job. And, I was still, 18? And it just so happened that the first job that I got that I actually enjoyed was in a bar. And prior to that, when I was 16, I had a summer job at a Russian restaurant in Parnell in Auckland. My mum got me that job because they were Russian, so we knew each other. And, I kind of enjoyed it. It was an interesting experience. My first table was a hen's Jew of 10, 30-year-olds. It was crazy. Yeah.
Hen's Jews can be destructive, man.
Yeah, no, they had fun and didn't, the good thing about that is that they weren't expecting any sort of high-end service or anything, and that was literally my first night. So it was good. It worked out well. And then, I went on to study, finished that, and just wanted to get out into the workforce. And actually, probably my first job after that was selling vacuum cleaners, the Kirby's, if you've ever heard of them.
Oh.
So that's when you go door knocking and do the presentations and stuff, which taught me a lot. It taught me not to take rejection personally because it wasn't about me, obviously. And then after that, I got into a bar in Albany. It was called Reservoir at the time. And I walked in hoping to get a waiter job because that's all I knew. And the GM was like, do you want to be on the bar? I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And they chucked me on as a trial on their busiest night. It was 5 deep. It was crazy. They were super busy at the time as well. And I remember at some point during the night, I got an order for a JD and Coke. And I come up to the other bartender next to me and I was like, mate, what's a JD and Coke? He's like, oh, for fuck's sake, man. And he didn't even tell me. He was like, he just continued on working. But I kind of realized that girls were ordering vodka lemonades and guys were ordering bourbon and Cokes. And for me that night, bourbon was Jack Daniels, and I just kept serving that and it worked out. And that was kind of the beginning of hospo for me. At some point during that job, I remember walking into the venue. We were just about to get busy and it was nice and relaxed, the calm before the storm. The guests were relaxed and having a good time and chatting, and all of the staff were there. They were pumped. They were ready to work, but they were also in a good mood. And I thought, this is so cool. Everyone's here to come and enjoy themselves, but also when they're working there, they're there to work hard. And it's something I seem to be, getting good at. And so I thought, I could probably do this. And that was the beginning of that.
Because at some point you've gone from wondering what a JD and Coke is to actually becoming a fairly well-established and respected mixologist.
Yeah, I did, and I have to, I have to say that I had a good mentor at the time. I went to Melbourne because I thought, what would be the best job in hospo? And at that point in my life, I thought a general manager of a 5-star hotel would be like the ultimate. I was 19, so I didn't know any better. And I started applying all over the world for just any hotel job, really. I applied in Switzerland, in England, in Canada, wherever I could, in Australia. And actually, I think I applied to the Buckingham Palace as well. And
that is,
I didn't hear from them for like
ambitious
ages.
for sure.
Yeah, and I thought, this is rude. Why aren't they answering? They could at least say no. So I emailed them again. I'm like, hey guys, like, is there any feedback? And they're like, well, you know, we have at least 3 months to review your submission and like reply to you. So please bear with us. So I was like, okay, fine. And then a week later, I received this incredible letter, like on the most expensive paper, written by hand, being like, I'm sorry, but we do not accept your application. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is still a very nice no. Thank you very much. And then a job came up in Melbourne to pre-open the Hilton South Wharf. And so I had a friend living there, so I thought, why don't I fly over for the interview, do the interview, spend some time with my friend. And I did really well. I got the job. I went over there. And pre-opening part was super fun. I enjoyed it because we got like free tours all over the city. And, you know, I happened to get into concierge. And so we would park these incredible cars. So that was fun as a 19-year-old. But then when sort of the grind hit and the corporate structure came in, I really felt out of place because you realize you're a number in a hotel environment. And so, yeah, that kind of came to a halt after about 7 months. And I came back to New Zealand and got a job at the Lennon. I don't know if you guys know, but it used to be a somewhat iconic bar in the Viaduct in Princess Wharf. Yeah, and sort of went on from there. That's where I met my mentor, Andy Ruzic, and he introduced me to cocktails, basically, and did weekly trainings with the whole team. Took me to Sky City, where he worked before, and developed their beverage program, and just explained to me how he went to Thailand and said, before he went there, he said, oh, I absolutely hate Thai food, because he didn't know any better, because at that time, especially in New Zealand, Thai food was probably really bland and boring. But if you go to the source, it's super exciting. And so he got super inspired and made his beverage program in the Sky City around his trip to Thailand, and all these flavors and how they combine together. And it was so cool, and I was so inspired. Like, wow, there is so much more to, you know, cocktails than just a martini or a mojito or a margarita. You can do so much more. It was cool because I was also a ballroom dancer before I went into hospitality. Jeez. And that was kind of my creative outlet. Yeah, so once I stopped dancing, I had nothing to channel my creativity into. And here come cocktails. So I got really, really into it. And that was kind of like the reason I think I've stayed in hospitality and why I've progressed the way I did, because basically the more I got into cocktails, the more I wanted to learn about every aspect of them, you know, the fruit, the flavors, how they combine, but also like, why am I using tequila in a margarita? And that comes in terms of history, but as well as, you know, there's bourbon. What is bourbon? How is it made? Why is it made that way? And then you end up understanding that, oh, it's distillation. What is distillation? How does it work? And then, oh, alcohol comes from fermentation. What is fermentation? And so it, you know, takes you down this rabbit hole of trying to understand absolutely every aspect of how a cocktail is made. And that, I guess, how I got to making rum at the same time, is trying to understand every point of that touches a cocktail and what makes it good. And eventually I thought, I think every bartender has a dream of opening their own bar or something like that. A lot of them get, great gigs like brand ambassadors. I mean, Dickie Cullimore, he's from Christchurch. You guys must know Dickie. He's the global brand ambassador for Bacardi, so he kind of got that dream gig. And so for me, it was sort of like a bar would be so cool, but I reckon even cooler would be a brand that I could take around the world and just travel and share with people and, I guess express myself through as well.
I like that approach. That's a very different approach, like you say, to most bartenders. Like, you see a lot of them go the other direction, but you taking each step back to see where does this come from, where does that start. That's a really good way to do it. That's really neat. I like that.
I mean, I've got 2 questions before we dive into the rum, and one kind of picking up on something that you were talking about, Igor, which is what does make a good cocktail? And I know that that's a very broad question, but what makes a good cocktail? And then secondly, how many ingredients is too many ingredients?
I think making a good cocktail is actually really simple. It's a matter of good quality and balance. I think that's the 2 key ingredients you have to have. Obviously, there is, when you're making a sour, if you've got bottled lime juice or lemon juice, then you've already let yourself down or let your cocktail down that way. And then if you use fresh stuff, then it's so much easier to make a great drink. Same with spirits as well, right? If you use something subpar. I remember I worked at Racket Bar in Auckland, and there was a rum bar, and this is 10 years, 12 years ago. There was nothing like that in probably New Zealand. They were so focused on rum. We had probably around 50 different ones. It was cool. And we were playing around with our key drink was old fashioned because it really highlights the spirit really well. And we were one day making just a variety of old fashions, and for some reason decided to make one with Karuba. And it just didn't work. It was a terrible old fashioned, and nobody wants to drink it because obviously there's no real barrel aging there. The color isn't what it seems, and the flavors probably don't come from the spirit itself, right? They come from flavorings, which is the one thing about the rum industry that's a bit, I call it the wild, wild west of spirits. You can kind of
You're not the only
make
one.
up your own rules.
We've said that before too,
But I think balance and quality, and balance is the hard thing to learn. I've come recently to understanding that, the more I work with the kitchen as well, the more I apply their techniques. So all of my cocktails now have salt in them, for example, because it's also a flavor amplifier, just like sugar. But for me, it's sort of like if you have your spirit, which is your base, it's the strong part, what gives you the body, and then you've got your sweetener, and then your sour. For me now, in my head, something is still lacking, It is a sweet and sour drink. But if you add that salt, it kind of just binds it all together and gives it a bit more dryness and sophistication. So just a sprinkle of salt in any of your cocktails is a really good trick to just level up, I think.
And we're talking, so if you make up a saline solution, we're just talking drops, or do you sprinkle a bit of the
I like
salt?
sprinkling, it's like a bit of magic. People don't necessarily know what it is, but saline works just as well, obviously, if not better, because it mixes in so much better. But I've got my salt jar right next to me at the bar all the time, and the margarita is probably the one drink that sees the least of that. But every single cocktail will, including an old-fashioned, actually. Because if it's only a little bit, then it doesn't make it salty. It just makes it drier. And you can compare that to, I think, what sometimes yeast does with fermented beverages as well. It kind of, it doesn't only add the alcohol, it also adds different, and other bacteria as well as yeast, right? They add more than just the alcoholic part to it. It's about the complexity, it's the acidity. Yeah.
I've heard the same thing with salt with coffee, and because I remember I was trying to up my game with my filter coffee, which is not something you want to up your game on ever. But I'm Canadian, so it's all bad coffee. But somebody told me, they said put a sprinkle of salt in your coffee grounds, and then they said it's gonna help with the acidity, help with the bitterness, and it's just going to make sort of the actual coffee flavor pop a lot more. And now I do it all the time. It's so much better. Nice. And you don't ever taste salt. It just brings out different flavor. So I could totally see how that would work. Yeah. So
salt builds bitterness, so that makes perfect sense.
Right.
I actually got into the final of the Campari cocktail competition in Dubai. I made the drink by accident because I was making a dirty martini and a Garibaldi side by side. And so I put my gin and vermouth in the mixing glass and then my Campari into the highball. And at the same time, I was chatting to someone. And then the brine went into the Campari instead of going into the martini. And I was like, oh, damn it. I was like, oh, well, I might as well try it. And I did. And I'm like, oh, this actually works. Because Campari is so bitter that a lot of people, especially if they don't have the experience, their brain will only focus on the bitter and they won't be able to taste anything else. But if you add a bit of salt to it, then it really dulls that bitterness and then you can get all of the other flavors out as well. So it's a really good trick. Yeah, so I made a drink that was basically, I think it was sherry, chocolate liqueur, Campari, and olive brine. And I lost that competition because one of the judges was a girl, and she highly voted a drink with violets and strawberries in it. So still proud though.
No, you got to take that.
Yeah.
And yes, so my second part of the two-parter, how many ingredients is too many? Because I see plenty of mixologists and bartenders on social media, and I'm like, okay, how many ingredients is that? 5, 6, 7. Okay, we're getting up there now, and there's some really weird stuff that I've never heard of. Although I am looking at it from just a home perspective rather than a professional, for sure.
I think, if you want to keep it simple, then take a classic, once again, like a daiquiri, and then muddle some fruit in it, and that's enough. So, that's a 4-ingredient cocktail. I'm also a big fan of keeping it local, so we don't grow very good limes in New Zealand. So just go for the lemons, they're fine, they're beautiful, they're juicy, they grow in everybody's backyard. Except for mine, for some reason, I get 3 lemons a year, and my neighbors get 500. It's ridiculous. Honey is, so local and sustainable and good for us. Not that cocktails are, but and then whatever fruits in season. So the simpler the better in that sense. But obviously, I think a lot of bartenders will get bored with such simple recipes and will want to venture into experimenting and making them more complex or more, I guess, culinary is the trend right now. I've seen tzatziki martinis and caprese salad martinis and whatever else. And those are exciting, but you're right, the work that goes into them is unsustainable in terms of, a bar environment.
Yeah.
Unless they're completely pre-bashed and all you have to do is pour it kind of table side or pour stir over ice and serve. But I think if you stick to the classics and you don't have to use just sugar syrup or granulated sugar in your daiquiri, right? You can make that syrup into your seasonal syrup. And that already, although it's still technically one ingredient, when you're making it, it's a lot more interesting, and you can incorporate so much into that. So when you're making the syrup itself, you can make a tea base out of whatever, herbs or actual tea, and then sugar and fruit, and that will be a really complex, interesting cordial that you can then use as part of that daiquiri. So it's still a 3-ingredient cocktail, but then one of the ingredients could have another 3 parts to it, right? Yeah, and I think that's another rabbit hole that you can go down, and either make it simple for yourself in terms of service, but also complex on the menu. It's what I have to say, one of those classic cocktails is the Long Island iced tea with 5 different spirits in it, citrus and Coke. And everybody loves to hate on that drink. And for good reason too, right? Like, how do you see that being a good drink?
Yeah, you're not really buying it for the flavour, you're buying it to get from A to B very quickly.
Yes, and what's interesting about that is that's what sells it as well. When somebody's reading the menu and they're looking at a margarita that has tequila and Cointreau triple sec in it, so 2 kinds of spirits, and then you look at a Long Island iced tea that might be a little bit more expensive, but there are 5 different spirits in it, although they don't know that it's probably the same strength or maybe slightly stronger than the margarita itself. It just looks like better value on the menu, and people or bartenders in general need to probably take that as a lesson, that when you're creating a menu, you want to create value in what people are reading, So saying that you've got 3 ingredients and it's simple might sound like a good idea to you, but it doesn't sound like a good deal to the customer. So the more interesting you can make it sound on the menu, the more likely it's going to be a successful drink. And that's kind of my, I guess, learning from the Long Island iced tea. Not that I enjoy making them, because obviously we never pre-batch it or anything, so it takes a while and it gives me no satisfaction. And it clearly tells me who the customer is as well.
That's totally fair. I think every time you go to look at a cocktail menu,
you do have lessons that you can learn from them. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's dive into a rum. Now, which one of these here? We've got B3 and B4. Where should we start, Igor?
I guess B3. So the 3 Moons is the blue wax. It is the original rum we've started with. At first, my first 2 batches were distilled with Soren from 1919 Distilling.
Nice.
Actually, kind of when I first came back from Dubai to New Zealand in 2020, my whole plan was to start making rum. And the first thing I did was find all of the distillers in Auckland that I could get in touch with. And Soren, actually from his website, it seemed like he was doing really interesting stuff. He wasn't making rum. That's something I was afraid of, is that he might, see this as competition, or other distillers would, and they wouldn't want to contract distill. But I didn't really know much about it, the business itself. So anyway, I got in touch with him, and I thought I'd go and see what he's doing. We went over, had a look. I bought his first whiskey, it was a blended one as well. He's now released a single malt, but that was more of an American style, I guess.
Yep.
And I then asked him if he would make the rum for me, and he agreed, and we did. So the recipe is mine. The 3 Moons is made with a Kumara fermentation starter. And I got that, basically I thought, to me the most special rum out there is Jamaican, and that's to do with the dunda. It's to do with the wild bacteria. It's how they interact with the molasses and how they enhance, some say enhance the flavor, some don't think so. I think so. Because otherwise you're just making fermented molasses rum, you know. But it's when the wild bacteria get to play around with the spirit, well, with the mash, and add their own character, because they are from here, you know. The molasses itself never comes from New Zealand.
Yeah.
So how do we make it a rum of New Zealand sort of thing? That's kind of the idea, is to give it that character that would eventually be recognized as something that's instantly recognizable as from New Zealand. And to me, that's really the wild bacteria. So the way I've gone about that is to, first of all, to do the Kumara fermentation starter, which was inspired by Batavia Arak, which is the Indonesian style of rum. But they use fermenting red rice cakes, which they then add to the molasses mash, ferment that, and distill it. So I thought that was so cool that it is such a big point of difference. It is still rum, but because it's got that point of difference during production, they do call it specifically Batavia Arak, which was the first luxury spirit in the world, apparently, at some point, when I guess sugar was the highest traded commodity.
Yeah.
And I went onto the Ministry of Rum page on Facebook, because I think there's a lot of geeks out there that actually get rum and love it and understand it, and you can trust their opinion. If you've ever been on the gin page on Facebook, that's just
It's carnage.
yeah, it's like a bunch of people in midlife crisis that have found a hobby in drinking gin. That's what it looked like, you know. But with rum, they're so serious. They get their like bricks meters out and measure the sugar content of the bottles and all this. And so I asked them, "Do you guys think Batavia Arak is rum?" And basically, everybody said yes, absolutely. And what really convinced me is when somebody said, if Malibu is considered a rum, then Batavia Arak is definitely a rum. So I thought, okay, I can go with a Kumara fermentation starter and still get away with calling it a rum. That was kind of my justification for using it. And I mean, it's not even much. It's a couple of liters of the fermentation mash itself. It's to get the yeast colony to develop and grow a bit stronger. And then that gets pitched to the molasses, which I try and ferment for about 2 weeks. So instead of the 3 to 5 days, which everybody loves doing because obviously efficiency, time is money, I really like it to really develop the flavor. And that's where all of the wild bacteria get to sort of interact with the fermenting mash as well and really develop the funk, which I think it's coming through better and better with every batch. Yeah, so it's double distilled. I've got a Portuguese 500 liter copper alembic, and then it is rested in New Zealand ex red wine barrels.
All right.
So it's called 3 moons because it is 3 months in the barrel.
I was going to ask if that's interesting. 3 months, because you don't have to barrel age your rum.
No, but I thought if I just release just a white rum, as they call it, then it's sort of competing, you know, new make against new make. And I really wanted this to be, especially as a first rum, as special as possible. I wanted it to be complex and unique. And I think it did that. You know, it's strong on the pot still flavor. All of that color is natural from the barrel.
In just 3 months?
Sorry?
In just 3 months?
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then you look like at a 12-year-old whiskey and you're like, how are you so pale? That's, yeah.
Yeah, that's the region. I think that's the regionality of it.
Maybe it is, yeah. So it just doesn't interact as much with the wood. And here, especially in summer, especially in like a concrete warehouse, it gets pretty hot in there.
Yeah.
So, and you can tell like by the color. So the first one batch 3 was made during the summer, and then batch 4 was autumn, and I bottled that in June, so last month. So you can see how there's a lot less interaction, but they're also different barrels, so each barrel is a little bit unique in its own right.
So I just had my first sip of it, and like, this is like unlike most rums I think I've had before. The funk on the nose, definitely there. Like, it's something I can't describe, and it's nice. I love it. It's kind of like no, I really can't describe it. But on the taste, I definitely get the red wine barrel. That's definitely there. And I don't get any of those bad rum notes that I get from like the cheap rums out there, like the metallic-y. I don't get that at all.
No.
It's gentle, easy. It's got, a really sipping sort of flavor to it with a lot of like wood spice, I'd say, like cooking spices almost. Like, I'm sure there's no spices in it, but yeah, it's
that funk is almost grassy. And there is I do get a wee bit of the red fruit on the nose. Some of that Pinot barrel or the red wine barrel. But yeah, and then there is something almost like a. I mean, I don't know if I'm smelling that roasted kumara because I know that that there's a kumara starter in there, but there is something. Yeah. It's not your typical rum sweet note. It's not like a syrupy golden syrup or something along those kinds of lines.
I think that's also to do with the oak. The majority of rum makers will go for American oak, and this is European. I'm pretty sure most of it is Hungarian, but yeah, it's a lot denser. It's a lot spicier.
Yeah,
but it's also almost. I wouldn't say has a bit of balance with the spirit, but it does let it kind of have its own character. While with the American oak, and I love American oak, I'm not saying anything against it, it's delicious. But it has so much more of that vanilla and baking spice that it can overpower the spirit quicker. So the Three Moons is, to me, still a mixing rum. It is very young and spicy and full of character. So I would, generally recommend mixing it with something. But I have seen people use it in old fashions, and lots of people take it in as shots as well. So yeah, it's proven to be actually super versatile, which I really, really like about it.
I am going to make an old-fashioned with this just because you've suggested it. Now, what is a good amount of simple syrup to be putting in? Are we talking like a bar spoon, 2 bar spoons? What would you do?
For me, a good old-fashioned would be probably, about 2 bar spoons. So about 5 mil. Yeah.
Right.
Is
and
it
then
1 to 1?
Do you shake or stir?
Oh, stir for sure. Yeah, and some salt. Remember?
Yes. And I was about to say, and definitely some salt. That label art is amazing.
Thank you.
What inspired that, and who did you go to?
I went to my wife. So my wife did that. She's a very talented designer. She spent 12 years at an art school in Russia, which was like extra curriculum, and this is why she doesn't paint anymore. And then she finished a graphic design degree in AUT in Auckland, and just started working for magazines from then on. But while she was at the art school in Russia, she actually developed her own style of painting, and it's with an architect's pen. Those pens are designed to kind of basically draw straight lines. And at some point, she says her arts teacher came up to her, saw what she was doing, and just gave her the pen, the architect's pen, and said, try and draw with this or paint with this. And she did, and she loved it, and she continued using it. And we've only I've only ever seen a couple of her paintings, like that she's drawn since we've been together. And I absolutely love her stuff, but she just refuses to paint anything. Anytime on my birthday, she's like, "Oh, what do you want?" I'm like, "Just paint me something, please." No, I'm taking you out. I'm like, fuck. Anyway, I was actually gonna call the company Waitemata Rum Company after the Auckland Harbour, but then I thought I have to ask the appropriate iwi for the permission to use a Māori word. So I've got in touch with the Ngati Whatua, and I asked them, I said, "Look, this is the plan, this is what I want to do. Can I please use the word, the name?" And they said no, because it's a sacred place to them, holds a lot of mana. And I respected that. I thought it would be rude to still go ahead. And it actually makes me wonder how other brands use Māori names, especially if they don't have anything to do with the culture itself. I'm not, saying they shouldn't, but hopefully they do it in a respectful way. And then I was left with this hole, right? Like, the name is such a big part of creating a brand. So I didn't know how to continue, because I was so inspired by the name Waitemata. To me, it was, this is where we come from. This is sort of where the rum comes from. And so especially for the international market, it would have made so much sense. And then one day we were walking at a nature reserve behind my parents' house when we first came back to Auckland with my daughter, with my wife. An interesting thing about Waitemata is that Anna, my wife, she just couldn't design anything from that word. She was like, "I've got nothing. Like, I've got no inspiration from it. It gives me no mental images that I can work from." And then we were walking at this nature reserve, and there was this information board, and it said "Stories of Bayside," because it was called the Bayside Reserve. And I was like, "Oh, that's a great name, like, I could totally use that." And then I said, "Anna, we're gonna call it Bayside." She was like, "Oh, I got it." And that's basically what she came up with, just from hearing the name.
I spotted the little R2D2 down right in front there.
Yeah, there is.
That's beautiful. That's great.
So Bayside Rum Company, 3 Moons Rum.
Yeah.
Right.
So the R2D2, that's an actual beach from somewhere. It's a collage, and so there was a bin there, and so I told Anna, I'm like, "Can we remove the bin, but instead of like not having anything, let's just put a robot there?" And she put the R2D2 on there, and it's a cool little addition that people
Little Easter egg.
usually don't see, and then when they do, they're like, "Oh, that's amazing."
Yeah.
They tell you. I love it.
So now just pouring the batch 4, and so you said that this one was bottled fairly recently.
Yeah, and it's still at least 3 months in the barrel, but a different barrel at the same time. So the first barrel, the batch 3, I got from Cooper's Creek in Auckland. And I was picking up some barrel racks from them, and I saw this black barrel just sitting there in the midst of other stuff, and I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "Oh, just some barrels we're getting rid of." And I went and smelled it, and I was like, "Wow, that's incredible." So it was really cool. It was really nice and fresh, and I guess as you can see, the color is a lot deeper. I think it was a Merlot in there, in the batch 3. And then batch 4, the barrel came from Hawke's Bay, where I get most of my barrels from. Yeah, and that's most likely a Pinot barrel. I'm not sure what they're doing in Hawke's Bay, but somehow they end up there.
This is wild.
Yeah.
It's somehow, and now this is again a big lesson for not judging a book by its cover, but somehow the lighter coloured spirit has got a spicier, more robust nose than the darker coloured one.
Yep.
That is quite... So do you have to, part of your role here, is it explaining the fact that there may well be differences between batches, that you're not trying to kind of blend it out for a more consistent product, that if you buy a bottle of Three Moons in summer versus in winter, that you're going to get a slightly different product?
Yeah, I think so. And because it's still such small production, I can blend them together, but then because they are batch numbered, and that's, to do even with the law, I think it's cool to see the difference. And if someone was to, continue buying it, if they enjoy it, then they could experience the rum in very different ways. Like, what was his name? Jeez, just came out of my head. The Good Bones vodka, right? Each of his batches is so different, and I love that. I think that's so cool because consistency is kind of artificial in a way, Yes, it's an art in itself, but then if you look at the bigger brands like Chivas or Johnny Walker or even the rum brands, to keep up that consistency, they do have to sacrifice, I think, the character and sometimes the flavor and the quality as well, because they have to sweeten them, they have to caramel color them, all sorts of things. But it is, if you look at it as a natural product that was made by a living organism, and all we did to it is really kind of concentrate the parts that we like the most about it, then being different, a little bit different, is not bad. It's interesting, it's exciting. And I think single barrel generally just has so much value as well, right? Everybody sees that as a more valuable product, and this is kind of that. So I just wanted it to be unique according to just how it comes out. Like, the spirit itself is pretty consistent, although I am trying to develop it further and further. But what the nature, I guess, does to it in terms of the climate and the barrels, because although they're Hungarian barrels, Hungarian oak, they have spent so much time in New Zealand already, where all of these seasons for 5 to 10 years, they've had the different wines in them. They've experienced so many winters and so many summers. That's my daughter. Mm-hmm. They all have such a unique character to them. Then I think it's good enough to let them kind of speak for themselves.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, I would almost, if I did not know any better and know that there was a spiced rum coming up, I would almost say that this was a spiced rum. It is, really oaky, some great amount of spice in there, and it is just, it almost feels like it's kind of the batch 4 is somehow like batch 3 concentrated or elevated somehow. I can kind of tell that they're related, but it's definitely quite different.
I've tried other rums that have worked with like the Dunder before, and they just haven't had the same character that this has. So I got to say, I think if anybody wants to really see what Dunder and Funk can do, I think this is it. Like, you got to try this one. This is awesome. Like,
thank you.
From a Kumara starter.
Yeah, which is also like super unique. Like, how cool is that? Yeah.
But that's really bringing that Kiwi element to it, because how do you make when, as you say, all of the commercial sugar product has to be imported, most of it from Australia? What are you doing to give your rum that Kiwi twist? And I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, not just the Kumara, but the funk from the Dunder as well, the yeast. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. All right, let's dive into the spice.
Okay. So
Which
where
I have
did
to say, I just want to say really quickly, I did
Yep.
a much better job at opening the wax than Cameron did. I opened this one, and mine looks nice and clean compared to his heck jobs on these ones.
wow. Okay. Sure. So
Speaks of your personalities.
heck job. Give you heck job. All right. So where did the inspiration for this one come from, and kind of what are the spices? What are you adding to it, and how'd you choose those?
So we're all about keeping it Kiwi, and for my birthday, instead of painting a nice painting for me, my wife took me out, and instead of going to a really nice restaurant, I said, why don't we just bar hop and visit all of the restaurant or bars and restaurants that have Bayside in them. And so we started in downtown Auckland in Commercial Bay, and then wind our way up to K Road on e-scooters, which was probably a bad idea at some point. But about halfway we went to my bar, which is just off High Street. Asa works there. I've known Asa for years, and he had the Not Another Jaffa Old Fashioned on with the 3 Moons, and I thought, well, that's just perfect because it works really well in terms of the flavor profile, and then Jaffa is obviously just another fucking Aucklander, but it also is that really famous, iconic orange chocolate dessert. And so, to me, that just made so much sense to create a spiced rum that was inspired by a Jaffa.
Quickly,
Quickly
though, what went into the Jaffa Old Fashioned? You've got to give us that.
I think it was obviously 3 Moons, chocolate bitters, and like orange curacao. So pretty simple, but yeah, it was delicious and worked really, really well. So
This is a Jaffa. Have you tried it?
I've just been nosing. But yeah, okay. So you had that, and that was your inspiration for I've got to do a spiced rum.
yeah. Well, I wanted to do, because 3 Moons was kind of it was a real hit with bartenders, but people outside of the trade didn't really get it. They were like, how do I mix it? It doesn't work with Coke at all. And so I thought, I need a rum for those rum and Coke drinkers, I still wanted it to obviously be interesting and complex and high quality and all the rest of it. But at the same time, I wanted it, at some point when I was geeking out on beers, I realized that even Heineken has its place. Sometimes you just want a beer and you don't want to think about it. And this was kind of it. I was kind of like, sometimes you just want a rum, you want to just mix it with your favorite mixer and not think about it. And if you're, hopefully it's my rum. So that was the idea of creating a spiced rum. But I wanted it to be local and interesting and fun. I think orange as the main flavor profile is really versatile. You can still use it in lots of cocktails. Works really well in an espresso martini as well, or in a dark and stormy. And that was kind of the reason for creating that. It was the retail part of the two, where it would potentially sell really well as a home mixing rum, Mm. So it's a little bit sweetened. I've added about 5 grams of sugar per liter. Apparently, usually it's about 15 or 20, so it's still on the drier side comparatively. And then all of the ingredients are completely natural. The oranges are from Gisborne. I used cocoa husk from, this time was Mian Chocolate Factory in Auckland. So instead of using like chocolate powder or anything like that, it's the byproduct of roasting the cacao beans, and usually that just gets thrown away. So I thought I'd use that because it does make an incredible tea. First time I've ever tried cocoa husk was in a tea, and it was just like drinking chocolate, but without all of that thickness to it, you know. And then there is the Halala Vanilla, which is sourced from the Polynesian islands. I always, if I'm gonna flavor a rum, I will always add a native ingredient. So this one's got Harapito in it. And that's only during the distillation process, so I put it in the botanical basket. The rum is infused twice in the sense that I put basically most of the ingredients in the botanical basket, so the vapor goes through that, and then again I steep all of the ingredients except for the Harapito, because it leaves a really, really spicy note. So I kind of wanted the aromatics of it, but not necessarily the spice itself, because I think that spice mixed with the heat of the spirit isn't a nice mix. But the complexity of the Harapito itself is really interested in there. And I also, because the feedback was that I needed to add sugar to it, the first trials were completely sugar-free. I thought, I'm not going to go as high on sugar as usually they do with spiced rums, but I will steep ingredients in there that gives you that perception of sweetness. So I've added chamomile and licorice to the infusion process as well. And if you've ever tried licorice powder on its own, it's so sweet. It fills your mouth with sweetness without actually having any sugar in it. And chamomile kind of does the same thing as well. It's nice and soft and floral. So yeah, it's almost turned out to be a spice rum leaning a little bit into like Amaro territory, without necessarily, adding anything bitter to it.
Because unlike other spiced rums I've had, this one isn't kind of big on your baking spices like nutmeg and cinnamon, which is what you often get. Nothing wrong with that, but yeah, this does go in a different territory. It's got a lovely body, lovely thickness there to it, which, as I'm hearing you describe these ingredients, makes sense. But I also love that cocoa husk approach, that idea of if I can give an ingredient a second go at making something before dumping or recycling, I'm all for it. That is, it's a bit maybe a bit more subtle than some spiced rums I've had, in that it's not big and spicy, but it's wonderfully complex, and it's as you say, it's bit of a spicy Jaffa.
Yeah. I mean, the orange is right there for sure, and you could drink that like just straight. I mean, I could see it being great mixing though. I think that would be an easy old fashioned, right? Like, would it be all right in there? Like, it feels like it would be good to me.
I think so.
I don't see why not.
Yeah. I could sit there and definitely just have a glass and pick it apart. That's great. I like that it's not that sweet, like some of them are really sweet, and it just sort of turns into a liqueur more than a rum,
But it makes sense when you think about Igor's background and his reason for making all of these, where, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you have created these with bartenders in mind, thinking that, well, if you're going to add some simple syrup or a bit of triple sec or something else, that there's room for sweetness to be added, rather than trying to kind of present something that there isn't room for more ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, because as a bartender, I would, prefer to work with things that actually are drier, because I can add the sweetness to it, no problem, when I need to. And in fact, I'll probably create better balance by adding it myself rather than having it in there already. So like doubling down on the sweetness is really hard, especially when you're kind of, working constantly with dry spirits, and then all of a sudden you get something really sweet and you're used to a specific recipe,
Sorry, everyone.
it kind of throws you off in a way. So yeah, this was designed to not only be mixed with Coke or something like that, but to also be able to be used in cocktails quite easily. One of the drinks I've seen it work really well in is actually the Jungle Bird, which is Campari, pineapple, a bit of lime, and the rum. And I think that's such a great recipe because, you know, there is the bitter dryness of Campari and the fruitiness of the pineapple, and it all sort of like comes together really well and complex. Yeah, I'll recommend that for sure.
I'm going to have to get some pineapple juice on the way home.
Yeah,
There you go.
That's an easy one at least.
All right, so the reason that you got in touch with us in the first place was because you have formed a collaboration, a partnership with a community organisation, and you're wanting to help give back to your local community through music. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, when I first started the brand, I've read a bit about business, and one of the questions that they ask you is sort of like, what are you doing for your customer, or what problem are you helping to solve? And I guess I took that literally, where I really want to not only, you know, make great rum and make money from it, but I do want it to be part of the community. And to me, that's a bit of a Kiwi spirit, is to help others out any way we can. So it's not only the music community that we want to work with, it's all sorts. We recently did a degustation of, I called it the distillation, the journey through the distillation of rum at Panacea in Auckland. And we got the charity called Everybody Eats involved. They basically have a restaurant. They have 3 restaurants, and you pay what you can when you go there to eat, rather than, you know, what you have to in normal restaurants. So that way, everybody gets to experience great hospitality, and everybody gets to experience really, really nice, well-cooked food. I think that's a really great project. So we got in touch with them, and we created this evening where they did the food. Cal Ross from Panacea did the drinks, and I did the rum journey. And yeah, through selling the tickets, we actually raised $3,000, and all of that was donated to Everybody Eats and to their cause, which is really cool. But this specific project for the music community is more about, I guess, getting young artists heard and helping them record music, which is so expensive, especially when you're just starting out. It's basically impossible to, you know, have the money to book a studio, to hire all of the equipment, and to record a song. So we got together with Thomas Rose, who's just released his own album as well. He's really talented, and he also, you know, wants to help his community, and that's where we came together by creating it's called the Music Incubator, or the Song Camp, where we raise money so they can hire the studio and the equipment and things like that to record songs with artists and to release them on air, and to be heard, to hopefully become popular, I don't know, viral, but, you know, just to release music, really, to get more New Zealand music out there. Because, like, I first met Thomas and I didn't even listen to his songs. I just really liked the idea of this project. But then I listened to his music and I was like, wow, this is fantastic. Like, he's such a great artist and nobody knows about him, you know? So, like, there are so many like that out there, and I think it's important. It's our culture, you know? only have good artists come out every now and then. And that's probably not because they're not in New Zealand. It's because they don't have the opportunity to release their music or to be heard. And this is what that project really is about. So we got together and created a rum based on Thomas's roots. He's Polynesian, and he suggested using coconut and kava from Fiji, to which I then found out that infusing kava into alcohol is actually completely illegal in New Zealand.
Wow.
So, yeah, I went to speak to MPI, and they said, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's not okay." And then I said, "Well, what if I infuse it into water and then blend it with the rum? Does that work?" And they're like, "We'll get back to you." And they still haven't actually. So that's under question, but I wouldn't necessarily want to get a recall from them, so I think we'll go with coconut and kawa kawa instead. So that's in the works right now. We've got a little takeover at a bar called Ghost Donkey in Commercial Bay in Auckland, and we'll be trialing the rum there. Thomas is going to be playing some music. Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to support this initiative, what's the best way for them to do that?
So we've got a Pledge Me page going, which is where we are trying to raise the money to fund the music camp. And the best way is to basically pre-order either a bottle of rum, the coconut and kawa kawa, or there are other rewards that you can get for donating the money. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, we'll find a link for that
Yeah.
and make sure that it is easily findable for anyone listening to this episode. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to add, Tom?
You need to get in touch with me so we can get your rum in our store down here. So I'll send you my email
Sounds good.
address after, and
Let's do it.
I think that'd be really cool. But other than that, like, just awesome. Well done with especially with using dunder that way. I think it's amazing. Yeah, definitely one of the more unique Kiwi rums I've tried.
Yes.
Awesome.
Which is not to take anything away from
No.
them, but this is just, it's something really different. I love the twist. I love the using native ingredients and recycling ingredients like those cocoa husks. You know, I think it's a great rum. I love your take and your background and how you've approached it, but also, yeah, the way that you speak of having been influenced by other people in the industry. I think it's awesome just to see that kind of that collaboration, sharing of ideas, and, you know, being part of the community. I think it's great.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Looks
Luke.
like BaysideRum.com. That's your website, eh?
Yeah.
So I assume people can buy it on the website?
Not yet. We're just doing some works on the website,
Okay.
and then we'll be relaunching it. But it is online. If you just Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah. Perfect.
And we'll work on getting it into Spirit and Spoke Juniper
Juniper
Collective.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Igor. This has been really cool. We'll definitely crack into these a bit more as well, and I'm sure we'll have some more tasting notes for you sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Only feedback.
To everybody listening, thank you so much again. If get in touch with Igor, please help support his initiatives and support his rum, of course. And if you want to get in touch with us, Distil-Nation@gmail.com or @Distil-Nation on all socials. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Igor, for your time and for these awesome rums. And cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for having me.